You think you understand how women fall in love, but what if the real process starts long before you ever say a word? And what if most men accidentally destroy it in the first few minutes without even realizing? There is something I need you to hear clearly. Attraction is not confusion for women, it is recognition. And if you are not aware of what she is recognizing, you will keep missing your moment without knowing it ever existed. Because love doesn't begin with effort. It begins with feeling safe in a very specific emotional way, not safe like comfort, but safe like curiosity without pressure. Safe like she can be herself without being evaluated, chased, or performed for. When a woman meets a man, her mind is not asking, "Is he good looking?" Not at first. Her nervous system is asking something far more primitive. Do I feel free around him, or do I feel managed? Most men don't realize this shift is happening in real time. They try to impress, they try to prove value, they try to say the perfect thing, as if attraction is a test they can pass with the right answers. But here is the truth from years of observing human behavior patterns. Women don't fall in love with performance, they fall into emotional resonance. That means she starts paying attention to how she feels in your presence when you are not trying to control the outcome. And this is where everything either begins or collapses. Because the moment a man becomes outcome dependent, needing her approval, needing her reaction, needing her validation, his emotional energy changes, and women are extremely sensitive to that shift. Not consciously, subconsciously. She will not say, "I sense insecurity." She will simply feel a subtle tightening, a loss of curiosity, a quiet step back in her energy. On the other hand, when a man is grounded in himself, when he is present without chasing, when he is interested without attachment to results, something very different happens. Her mind relaxes, and in that relaxation, her curiosity starts to breathe. This is the space where attraction begins to grow, not because of tricks, not because of scripts, but because her emotional system is no longer in defense mode. Let me be very direct with you. Most men are not rejected because they are unattractive. They are rejected because they unknowingly create emotional pressure in the first interaction, and pressure kills curiosity faster than anything else. A woman cannot fall in love in an environment where she feels emotionally managed, but she can slowly open up in an environment where she feels emotionally free, and this is where psychology becomes powerful. Not to control her, but to understand the invisible signals that shape her perception of you. Because love is not triggered by one moment. It is built through repeated emotional impressions. And the first impression is never what you say. It is what she feels when she is around you without explanation. Curiosity is not love. Most men make the mistake of thinking that if a woman is interested, she is already emotionally invested. She isn't. She is only observing. And observation is a dangerous phase because it is where she decides what you mean to her emotional world. At first, she is simply reading patterns, not your words, but your consistency, not your jokes, but your emotional tone, not your attention, but your stability. And here is the psychological shift most men never notice. Curiosity turns into emotional attachment when unpredictability is paired with emotional safety. Let me explain that carefully. If a man is too predictable, she becomes bored. If he is too unstable, she becomes distant. But when there is calm emotional grounding, combined with moments of surprise in personality, humor, perspective, or behavior, her mind starts to stay engaged longer than expected. That longer than expected is where attachment begins forming. Because the brain does something very specific when it cannot fully categorize someone, it keeps returning to them. This is not manipulation. This is cognitive processing. The mind tries to resolve what feels incomplete, and emotional systems tend to attach to what they keep revisiting. Now listen closely to the next part. When a woman feels curiosity about you over time, her brain starts linking you with emotional states, not facts, states. How she feels when you respond late, how she feels when you are not overly available, how she feels when you are present but not overwhelming. And slowly, something subtle happens. She starts to associate your presence with emotional regulation. She feels more grounded when you are stable, more curious when you are slightly unpredictable, more engaged when there is depth without pressure. This is where most men ruin everything. They assume they must increase effort at this stage, more texting, more attention, more reassurance. But over-efforting breaks the psychological rhythm, because attachment does not grow from intensity, it grows from emotional continuity. If her emotional experience of you keeps resetting, too much, too fast, too available, her mind never has space to build internal investment. But when the experience is steady, with space between interactions, her mind begins to fill that space with thought. And what she thinks about repeatedly becomes emotionally important. There is another layer here most men never consider. A woman does not attach to how much attention she receives. She attaches to how she feels about herself when she is around you. If she feels calmer, more expressive, more seen without pressure, her brain tags you as emotionally significant. This is why trying harder often creates the opposite result. It shifts the dynamic from emotional freedom to emotional expectation. An expectation kills organic attachment. Attraction becomes attachment when her mind starts anticipating your presence, not because you demanded it, but because her nervous system has already started integrating you into her emotional pattern. And at that point, something changes silently. She doesn't just notice you anymore. She starts returning to you in thought without intention. And once that begins, the emotional thread is already forming. When attachment begins to form, most men completely misread the signs. They think she is becoming hot and cold. They think she is confused. But what is actually happening is far more internal and far more automatic. Her emotional system is now responding to you in waves instead of neutral patterns, and that is a very specific psychological stage, because once a woman starts attaching emotionally, her mind begins testing something she will never say out loud. Can this feeling be trusted long term? So she begins to observe you differently, not to judge you, but to stabilize her own internal response. One moment she may feel close. The next moment she may pull back slightly, not because she lost interest, but because her nervous system is trying to balance intensity with safety. This push and pull is not games, it is emotional calibration. And if you react incorrectly here, by panicking, over-texting, demanding clarity, or seeking reassurance, you disrupt the natural bonding process, because attachment requires emotional space to deepen. Now here is where psychology becomes very precise. When a woman is emotionally attached, her attention shifts from experiencing you to monitoring her own feelings about you. She starts noticing how she reacts when you are not around. She starts becoming aware of her own anticipation. She starts thinking about small interactions more than expected. And this is the key transition. You are no longer just a person in her environment. You are becoming a reference point in her emotional memory. She may not call it love yet. She may not even admit attraction strongly, but internally, her brain is starting to prioritize your emotional presence. You will see subtle behaviors that most men misunderstand. Longer pauses before replying, not always disinterest, but processing. Small tests of your emotional stability, not to manipulate you, but to understand your consistency. Moments of warmth, followed by slight distance, as her system regulates intensity. If you respond with pressure, you turn emotional curiosity into emotional resistance. But if you remain stable, calm, grounded, unaffected by the fluctuations, you create something very rare in modern dating: emotional safety without control. And this is where deeper attachment forms, because her brain begins to register you as someone who does not collapse under emotional uncertainty. Someone who remains steady even when her energy shifts. That steadiness creates trust at a neurological level, and trust is the bridge between curiosity and emotional dependency. At this stage, she is no longer just reacting to you in the moment, she is beginning to predict you, and prediction is the foundation of emotional bonding. But there is something even more important happening underneath all of this. Her mind is now storing emotional snapshots of you, not big moments, small ones, the way you responded when she was distant, the tone of your voice when she was unsure, the absence of pressure when she expected it. These micro-experiences accumulate, and slowly, without her conscious awareness, she begins to feel emotionally anchored to your presence, not because you chased her, but because you remained consistent while her internal world was fluctuating. And when a woman starts feeling that kind of emotional stability around you, the attachment stops being accidental and starts becoming inevitable. When emotional attachment matures, something subtle but powerful happens inside her psychology. She stops experiencing you as someone she is talking to and starts experiencing you as part of her internal emotional landscape. This is where emotional dependence signals begin to appear, not in dramatic ways, but in quiet behavioral shifts that most men completely overlook. She starts checking in with you emotionally, not just socially. Her messages may become less about information and more about emotional presence. Even a simple, "How was your day?" starts carrying weight beyond words. Because at this stage, she is not just communicating, she is regulating emotion through connection. And here is the key shift. Her nervous system begins to associate your presence with emotional grounding. When you are available in a calm, stable way, not excessive, not withdrawn, her mind starts to rely on that consistency as a form of emotional balance. This is not dependency in a negative sense at first. It is bonding, but bonding always follows a pattern in human psychology. First comes recognition, then curiosity, then attachment, then emotional reliance, and finally, what we call love. Love, in psychological terms, is not a sudden explosion. It is a long-term integration of emotional safety, familiarity, and positive emotional prediction. At this stage, she begins to imagine your absence, not in fear, but in discomfort, not dramatic loss, but subtle emotional imbalance. She may find herself thinking about you during ordinary moments, not because she is trying to, but because her brain has integrated you into her emotional loop. And here is something most men misunderstand deeply. Love is not created by intensity. It is created by emotional presence over time without instability. When a woman feels that you are emotionally consistent, when your energy does not punish her fluctuations, when your presence does not create pressure, when your absence does not create emotional chaos, her system begins to relax into attachment. And in that relaxation, love forms. Because love is not just excitement, it is nervous system safety combined with emotional meaning. At this point, she does not just like you, she does not just enjoy you, she begins to feel emotionally aligned with you in a way that is hard to explain logically. She may not label it immediately, but her behavior will reveal it. She prioritizes connection with you even in small ways. She becomes more emotionally open over time. She invests thought into your reactions, your mood, your presence, and most importantly, she starts including you in her internal future thinking, not as a fantasy, but as a possibility her mind no longer rejects. That is the final transition, when a woman's mind stops resisting the idea of emotional continuity with you and starts accepting it as natural. That is when love is no longer forming. It has already formed, not through manipulation, not through performance, but through emotional safety, consistency, and the psychological rhythm of human attachment. And if you understand this, you stop chasing moments and start understanding patterns. Now tell me this honestly in the comments. Have you ever experienced a woman slowly changing how she felt about you without a single clear moment, just a gradual shift you couldn't explain? And if this video made you see relationships differently, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still thinks attraction is about words instead of psychology.